starting out, real simple, brand new design. The easiest way to do it is the drop down arrow beside the white page, new embroidery design. Okay? Now this brings me to my main screen. Now some people look at this screen and say, oh, I like the way you've got it set up. I like the grids and I like the gray background. All of that you see is very cosmetic, and those are the things that we can set up on everybody's system so that it looks this way. Before we kind of get into the lettering, let me go over that part of it real quick, just for those of you guys who are new, who haven't been in class. If you want your screen to look like mine, then there's a couple of things that you need to do. First off, if you go to Window and Background, you can turn on your background color. Okay, so you go to Window, Background, and you just click Color On. Then I go back to Window and Background, and I can set that color. I click on that, brings up this little menu. I can set this to anything I want. Black, dark gray, and light gray all produce the same color. All right? Now, once that's on, you're good to go. Some people prefer working in inches versus millimeter. If you do, then go to View, Options, and turn on Display Inches. Again, the display inches, like the gray background, is one of those things that once you turn it on, you don't have to change it again if you don't want to. It stays that way. All right? Now, I tell you what, while we're here, I'm going to talk about one other thing while we're at this point. Everybody see the screen properties box? Well, Ethos has a feature that it'll show you your design in 1-to-1 scale on the screen, which basically means that I could go in, view my design in 1-to-1 scale, take a ruler and measure my screen, and actually see the actual size. Okay? Now, in order for this 1-to-1 scale to work, we have to adjust our screen properties. So we go to the View menu, we go to Options, we click on Screen Properties, and then you take a ruler and you measure the left to right distance of your monitor. Okay? Whatever that is, you type it in millimeters right here. Say OK. Then whenever you're working on a design, you have a zoom to scale option. On your zoom menu, you have a little down arrow, 100% zoom to scale. That will be pretty close to actual size of the design. Some people like to mess around with that. Some people like to see it actual size. This just gives you an option to do that. Okay? Now, again, one of those things, you set it up, don't have to worry about it again. Back to our screen here. Finally, the last thing is our grid. Okay? We have a 1-inch, I have a 1-inch by 1-inch grid set on my screen. I go down to the very first option on the bottom toolbar, which is Grid Settings. I turn my grid on. I specify my size in width and height, and 25.4 is exactly 1 inch. Okay? I say okay. There are a few other things in here you can play around with. Like, for example, there's a really nice polar grid. Polar grid gives you some nice curved shapes when you're doing circles and arcs and things like that. We're just focused on our basic rectangular. Don't turn on snap. You'll unless you realize what that does, it's probably going to give you some undesired results. When you're digitizing, it kind of makes it tricky to digitize. Grid on, 25.4, okay. Now, we've got our gray background, we've got our 1-inch lines, we're set to inches, design, save as template. I don't want anything else on here. I don't want to have digitized, I don't want a scanned image, nothing else, okay? Save as template, say OK. There's my default template. Click on that, click on save. It's going to come up and say, do I want to replace it? Yes, I do. Now, whenever I start a new design, it will have my settings set up the way I want. As you get into the software and as you start learning about setting your own stitch parameters and your densities and your underlays and even your needle colors, once you start figuring out what you want those to be, again, you can preset those up, save it as a template like we just did, and you won't have to mess with it again. If you always like to use a certain density or pitch, or you prefer a particular underlay, go ahead and set that up as part of your template so you don't change it every time. Also, with your needle colors, which is right here, your thread palette, you know, these are the default thread colors. Now, the reason we put them these pastel bright colors, it makes it easy to digitize from. A lot of times when I'm finished with my design, I'll specify the colors of that design so that I can print a run sheet, or that I can email a proof, or just so that I can remember what the colors are next time I work on that design. Well, let's say that I have a 12 needle machine. And on my 12 needle machine, I always needle 1 through 6 are like black, white, red, royal, yellow, gray, you know, whatever it is, okay? Well, I can preset these up to match those colors if I want to, okay? Again, all of that is part of working with a template. Once I preset them up, I would save it as my template, and then I don't have to worry about it anymore, okay? So anyway, that's all part of your template. Now, let's jump on and go ahead and start talking about lettering. We're going to go T for text. T for text, when we click on it, is going to give us a list of all the fonts that we have. Now, your 200 fonts are here in this list. The last 5 that you've opened are up here. So this part will always change. You might notice some of the fonts have a little S beside them. That means that that particular font uses a feature called Smart Text. What Smart Text does is, if your lettering gets too small, then it will go in and open up the inner parts of your A's and your O's and your B's so that they don't close up on you, okay? It also goes ahead and automatically assigns it to our small satin stitch effect, okay? So that's what it does when you have a little S beside it. Now, we're going to go down, we're going to choose our font, we're going to type in our lettering. Now, one of the features Ethos has is it has the ability to copy and paste in your lettering. So somebody sends you an email, or you have a Word document or an Excel spreadsheet that has lettering on there that you're trying to reproduce, then you can actually highlight it within that Word document or that email. So you click and drag to highlight it. You do Control-C for copy. You come into Ethos, you hit T for text, you pick your font, you left click on the screen, and you do Control-V for paste. And it will paste in what you copied. The last thing that I copied on my system was an email address of a coworker named Manoj Bakshi. And you can see that I just selected my font, went Control-V, and there it is, type it out. Now, for me personally, this is great because I am terrible at spelling. Here, this puts the emphasis of being spelled correctly back on the original person that typed it. All right? This is where I could also go into a Microsoft Word program, type it in, make sure it's spelled correctly, and then copy and paste, and I don't have to worry about the spelling being off. Now, once you have it listed in here, you can highlight it by double left clicking, and as you go down your list, it's going to show you what each font's going to look like. Notice on the font that I've chosen, instead of having an @ symbol right here, I've got this bar. Okay, everybody see that? That means that this particular font, which is called Times, doesn't have that particular character. It still maintains the properties of that character, but it doesn't have an @ symbol. Not a problem. I can left click and drag and highlight just that font, go to my font list and find one that does have the @ symbol. Okay? So anytime you see those rectangular bars like that, all that means is that that font doesn't have that character. Now, you can mix and match. You can do all kinds of things you want. I could come in here and highlight just the first name and change it to a different font. Or I could highlight just one character and change it. Or change it to a different color. Okay? Anything I want to do, I can do that. All right? This tells me my size. While I do use this occasionally, if I already know, hey, this is supposed to be 3/8 of an inch, it's supposed to be 1 inch, whatever, then I can go ahead and type in my size right here. We've got a lot of sizes pre-programmed, but it doesn't mean you have to use any of these, okay? Because what I can do is grab the corner or pull it in, or pull it up, or do whatever I want to do to make it the size that I want. Even if I adjust it, and then I'm like, oh man, I need to know what size that is because now I got to do another line or something else and I want it to be the same size, then I can come in here and highlight it and look. It tells me what size it was up there. All right? But, again, if I already know, hey, 1/4 of an inch, then I can go ahead and set it, type in my lettering, and there we go. Now, this icon allows us to manipulate our offset. It allows us to go in and adjust the lettering up and down off of an imaginary line. Let me talk about offset for just a second. First off, you'll notice if I bring a guideline down and I zoom in and get that guideline right on the bottom of my characters, that my S is a little bit lower and my E is a little bit lower than my 2 T's. That's done that way on purpose. When we generate stitches, and when I say we generate stitches, I mean stitch all outlines, this button right here. Pay particular attention to the direction of the E and the S versus the 2 T's. The E and the S, the stitches go up and down. The 2 T's, the stitches go left to right. That's done that way on purpose. When the E and the S stitch out, these stitches are going to pull up, as are these. But these stitches on the T's are not. They're pulling left to right. You know, that's something that you don't have to worry about when working with the fonts in Ethos. We've already got that pre-set up for you. All right? Now, with that, now let's come up here and talk about offset. Offset is where I can move lettering up or down on an imaginary line. Turn off my stitches. You ever hear me say turn your stitches off? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5th button, left hand toolbar, delete generated stitches. If you're digitizing in the software, or if you're just doing lettering or editing, you're going to use the delete and the generate a lot. Turn off. There's our outlines. Highlight the character or multiple characters. You can then move the offset up or down. Now, I like to use this when I'm manually making monograms. For example, I'm doing a 3-letter monogram with curls. Then I want, let's say, the middle letter to be larger. Then I want to take this letter, move it up I've moved it up 2 millimeters. Now I can take this letter, move it up 2 millimeters, and there's the base of my 3-letter monogram. Okay? So that's one of the things that you can use the offset feature for. You've got McDonald's, C, C, D, oops, C, D, again, I'll do the rest of it. Let's go to a different font. Now, doing a name like this, I want my C to move up. Not a problem. Highlight just the C, increase it. It's a dynamic increase, which means that as I click it, I can watch it change. Okay? So, that's your offset. Got some great features. Don't use it to say, well, gosh, these letters aren't straight across. You're right, they're not. Some of the letters hang lower, and that's done on purpose. Okay? You don't use the offset to change that, or at least I wouldn't. Next thing you have is your inner character spacing. That's this AB right here with the arrow going left to right. Inner character spacing is great for moving things closer together and moving letters further apart. You're doing script, you want them to overlap slightly, it's good for that. You've got a name, you need to get some extra spacing in there. You don't like the way 2 letters look next to each other, A's and T's, A's and W's, things like that, and you need to adjust the spacing. This is the button that will allow you to do that. Now, I'm going to come in and I'm going to say Control A for select all, and I'm going to press the delete key. I'm just going to clear off our screen a little bit. I'm going to move these guidelines back up out of the way. I'm going to go T for text. I'm going to come down and pick a script font. I'm going to pick my size. Now, there's my characters. If we zoom in, you can see that if I generate my stitches, even though they're touching, there's not much overlap between the B, the C, and the D. Now this is supposed to be script. It's supposed to have some overlap there. So I'm still in text mode. I've got that T for text turned on. You can see that one of the ways that I know I'm in text mode is by the way my icon or my cursor looks. It's an arrow with a little I bar beside it. I'll left click in between the characters, in this case the B and the C, and I can reduce this number. Same thing between the C and the D. I left click in between there. I reduce this number. And now this gives me more of an overlap. Alright? I can use this for other things. Now, to me, A looks a little too close to the W. So, click in between here and increase my spacing. Until I'm happy with the adjustment. All right? So I can move things closer. I can spread them out. Whatever I want to do as far as spacing goes with this section right here. Now, next is this T right here. After I press my T for text, if I press this T, you're going to notice that my font list has changed. These are the TrueType fonts that I have loaded in my system. Okay? With a TrueType, you can use it as a fill stitch, you can use it as a satin, or you can convert to a satin. I'm sorry, let me start over. You can use it as a fill stitch, you can use it as a running, or you can convert to a satin. Not every TrueType is going to convert well, and even when you do have a TrueType that converts to a satin, there could be a situation where you might have to go in and move some points. It's just the way it goes. Now, I'm not opposed to using this as a fill stitch or step stitch, okay? Especially when I'm working with jacket backs or anything that's kind of big, aprons or full fronts, all right? Also, we give you about 5 or 6 built in. Any font that you see in this list that has a DFN extension, like Athletico, is one that we gave you. If you go down to the G's, you'll see Greek. All right? So those are the built-in fonts that we've given. The rest of them, these are the TrueTypes that you have loaded on your computer. You download a TrueType font off the internet. Once you download it, if you're actually using Windows 7, you can double-click on that TrueType, and it will have a little install button. Okay? If you're not using Windows 7, then you can go into your control panel, double-click on fonts, and then it has a feature that will allow you to install the font. Once you do that, you close Ethos and reopen. It will be in this list that you see right here. There is a limit to TrueType fonts. It's 999. So if you have more than that, you might not see all of the fonts that you have. All the other features that we talk about when we talk about lettering are available to these fonts as well as your satin fonts. These are great fonts to use when you're doing applique. Okay? You're going to do applique. The first thing you want to do after you choose your font is change it from step which means fill stitch, to running. Now, at this point, if I want to generate stitches on this, there's my running stitch. Okay, there's half of my applique done right there. All right. If I'm going to use this for applique, and I'm not having somebody professionally cut it, or I don't have a cutter or anything like that, then what I want to do is go ahead and export this part out as a DST file. Again, I know it's only a running stitch, okay? But I'm going to export that out to my file. Now, again, think about what I'm saying here. My purpose of doing this is so that I can hand cut this letter A for applique. Okay? I'm going to export out this running stitch. I'm going to hoop up the material that is going to be my applique fabric. Not my shirt, not my jacket, my actual applique material. I'm going to stitch this A on that fabric. Maybe I got to do 5 of them. Maybe I got to do 3 of them. Whatever it is does not matter, as much as I can sew these as many times as will fit in whatever I've hooped. Okay? Then I can unhoop it, take it out of the machine, unhoop it, and I've got some great guidelines to follow to hand cut this out. Okay? Once I've got it cut out, then I can go in and put a border on it, and there's my applique design. I go to Outlines. I go to Text, Add Text Borders. It's an applique border. I want it to be this wide. I want it to use this color. And there we go. Okay. Last thing on TrueType fonts. We have one that we've given that's built in. It's called Stick. It's called Stick. You find it in the beginning of the S's when you're in TrueType fonts. And there it is, Stick font. Stick font is a single line font. It's designed for really, really small lettering. Now, there's my Stick font. Now, I don't want to get too heavy into this, but look at my B and my C. It's not exactly the quality that I have in mind. That's because of my stitch length. In a running stitch with Artisan Plus, you have only a few choices that you can change and manipulate. You have length, U-turns, and you have random. Well, in this case, our only concern is length. okay, across the board, settings-wise, when you're stitching something out, I never like to have a stitch longer than 1/3 of an inch, 8 millimeters. I never like to have it smaller than 1 millimeter. That's why I didn't go lower than 1 on this setting. I wouldn't go above 8 either. As a matter of fact, I probably wouldn't go above 4 because the software has a safety feature built in on the running stitch side that won't allow it to go past 4. Okay? So I've set it to 1. I say okay. Now, a lot better results by adjusting that stitch length. Okay? All right, to get back, T for text, push this again. Now we're back in our basic satin fonts that we have to work from. Next thing that you've got over there is the bold option. Now, bold is just like working with bold in anything else. There it is normal. There it is bold. Anything that I can do to thicken up my letters when I'm working with small lettering, any tool that I have that will make them work better, I'm going for it. Bold is one of those tools. On the surface, you think, not doing so much. Well, that might be true, but remember, it's expanding or fattening those columns. Okay? Going back to my rule just a couple of minutes ago about my stitch length, we were talking about a running stitch, not greater than 8, not smaller than 1. Well, that 1 falls into a satin too. This distance from here to here, that's your column width. That's what I don't like to be smaller than 1. If I measure, and I did that by going to Tools and Show Length, left click, 0.55. It tells me at the bottom of my screen how wide that is. Well, just from experience, I can already tell you 0.55 is not going to give you a good quality result. So even on this ABCD, the bold hasn't helped us enough. Okay? If this were the size I had to have, I would probably be thinking about using a different font. There are other serif fonts that we could use at this size. For example, I like a feature called small serif. Now, let's measure the columns. .24. Now I've got that thickness that I got to have in order for this to stitch out better. All right? But again, going back to bold, any little oomph that it can give me, any little extra help, I'm going to try to take advantage of that. Same thing with your italic. Highlight it. Turn on the italic feature. Again, on or off. Quick, simple, down and dirty. Hit the button and you've got it. Are there more ways to italicize this lettering? Sure. Are there more ways that give you more control? Yes. This way, quick, easy, no fuss. Now, after the italic, and I'm just highlighting everything and hitting delete just to get us back on a clear working screen. After the italics, we have left, center, and right justification. Okay. When you're just doing single line text, not that big of a deal. Alright? But as we get into the text tools that allow us to manipulate and change and put lettering on an arc and on it and distort and stuff like that, then the left, center, and right justification does come in more handy. T for text. First tool over here is line text. Line text. Once I click it, I left click and left click to draw an imaginary line. Notice a couple of things about this line. Number one, you can see the two base points. They're denoted by squares. Number two, you see a flashing cursor in the center of the screen. That is because I'm working with center justify. There's left justify. Here's center. And here's right. Okay? Now, once I choose my font, and my size, I can type in my lettering. Now, once it's typed in, again, all the same rules apply that we've been talking about. Highlight it, change it to a different font style, I can make it a color. I can make it left, center, or right justification. I can adjust my line. Now, that's all fine and good. But what if my design has two lines? Once I get to the end of the first line, I press the enter key, and there's my next line. And my enter key, and there's my next line. And so on and so forth. Perfectly centered, exact same arch, or line for that matter, for this one, whenever I want. Alright? Now, a couple of other things that I can do, or a couple other things about line text, and then some things, other things that I can do with it. First off, I could save this file, exit out, come back in next week, next month, next year, and hit T for text, go in there, and guess what? That line would still be there. Look, exit out. I'm not in text anymore. I could save this, come back in, T for text, click on it, boom. There's that line still there for me. So it stays with that lettering, okay? Now, a couple of other things that we can do with line text that are really important tools. T for text, line text. Now look, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a 3-inch line in. I know it's 3 inches because I use 3 squares. I pick my font. I pick my size, and I type in my lettering. Now, notice what happens with that lettering. Based on the fact that I picked that font and that size, my lettering is hanging out past my 2 base points. I should see that. Well, if I'm doing a bunch of names on left chest hat or left chest logos or hats or whatever, and no matter what, I don't want my width to exceed 3 inches. That's why I put that 3-inch line in there. I can highlight it, go to text and placement, and go to condense width. Now, condense width will force that lettering to stay within those 2 base points. Okay? It does keep it the same height, but it squeezes it to fit within those 2 points. All right? Now, you know, this is not an end all. You know, at some point, they will get too narrow to be effective. All right? But it's still a good alternative it's still a good alternative when you want to force your lettering to stay within a certain spot. Now, a couple other things. I can type in my lettering. Now look, it doesn't fill up my line. Highlight it, text placement. I can stretch it or space it to fill in that line. Okay? So placement gives me some options. Last thing on line text, I can create a vertical line, text, vertical. So, excuse me, I'm sorry. First thing I did was I went to text and line text and drew a vertical line. Then I go to text and turn vertical on. Then when I type in my lettering, it'll be vertical. Okay? I can still space it. I can still highlight it. Whatever I want to do. All right? Now, the next one we have is arc text. T for text. Here's arc text, the second one. I have to put in 3 points for arc text. 1, 2, 3. All right, so I do my left side, I do my right side, and then I do the arc. So again, T for text, arc text, left click, left click, left click. Now notice that I've got 2 squares and a triangle. That's consistent throughout the whole software. What I mean is, when you're working in Ethos, anytime you see a square, that represents what's called a line point. Anywhere you see a triangle, that represents a curve point. Just kind of keep that in mind, you know, when you're working throughout the software. Now, notice I'm on left justification right here. There's center, there's right. Type in my lettering. Okay? Same rules apply. Notice that my lettering doesn't fill up this arc. Text, placement, stretch or space. Either one. Space, stretch. Maybe I want to do 2 lines. Enter. There's my arc again underneath it. Okay? Now I'm just going to delete this stuff. What if I'm doing a reverse arc? Okay? Now, look what's going on with some of my lettering. It's pinched at the top. Well, trusty old placement. Text, placement. Look, my lettering is defaulted to sitting on top of this arc. That's the default. Center, centers it on the arc. Below, drops it below the arc. Okay? There's your arc text. Delete that. T for text. Suppline. Suppline is my shape text. I create a shape. Double click. And there we go. Type in my lettering. Got to be careful with suppline. A slight movement will give you much different results. Takes a little practice and a little playing around with supplying to get it where you want. But you've got all these tools that you can at your disposal. You've got your spacing, you've got your offset, you've got your in placement where you can drop it center or below. All those tools that you can go in and use to get this just right. Okay? Now, imagine that we've got a logo right in the middle here, right in the middle of our screen. And we want to put lettering in a perfect circle around that logo. T for text, circle text. You'll notice that I've got a crosshair, and at the bottom of my screen in the lower left-hand corner, it says Enter Center of Circle. So I just go to the center of this design, left-click, and drag to the right. That is key. I do not want to drag to the left. I don't want to drag up, down. I want to drag it to the right. Once I've made my circle, I left click. Now, here's the top half. Type in my lettering. Hit my enter key. Type in the bottom half. Okay? Now my design is in a complete circle around my logo. All right? Anything that I want to change, I can change. Now look what's happened. Braves 2013 is hanging out past the halfway point on my circle. Ooh, I better go in, condense it down a little bit. Okay? Another thing that I can do with circle text is create my circle. And it'll continue around in the circle as long as I keep typing. Okay? So I can use it either way. Alright? Now, I'm going to do Control A. Select all. Delete. One more tool that goes with these four that we don't have a button for. It's called Twin Arcs. Twin Arcs is a combination of arc text and circle text. To use it, we go T for text. We come up here to the text drop down, and we go to the Twin Arcs tool. You'll notice there's my four icons that we just finished discussing, and then there's one that doesn't have one. That's Twin Arcs. It works very similar, or it kind of has properties of the arc text and the circle text. You'll see what I'm talking about. We select it, left click, the height of my arc. Okay? So kind of like I was doing arc text a second ago. The difference is once I type in my top half, I can press the enter key and type in the bottom half. Now, one of the things that I like to use this for is I'll grab this point on the bottom and I'll pull it straight. Then I can drop a logo in here, arc, straight, everything's good with the world. Maybe my logo is too big and there's not enough space in here. Well, I can highlight it, remove my offset, and move it down or up, whatever I need to do. And I could do it with powder too. I could have moved it up instead of moving springs down. But either way, all right? So, now, I'm going to unmute you guys.